Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO and COO of Treasury Careers. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Leveraging Technology to Deliver Value from Accounts Payable, Supercharging Your ERP. I would like to thank our webinar sponsor, Mineral Tree, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Accounts payable is no longer a back office afterthought. It's a core strategic business function. Technology is key to unlocking the strategic value of accounts payable at your company. Today, you will discover how companies of all sizes are aligning AP automation solutions with ERPs to lower invoice processing costs, mitigate payment risk exposures, improve supplier relationships, and impact productivity across the enterprise. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about treasuryjobs.com. I'll cover a few housekeeping items and review our learning objectives as they offer our value proposition to you for investing your valuable time with us today. Now, our exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available in the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll also be sending you links via email to the presentation and the recording of this webinar over the next 24 hours. For those of you who are interested in CTP credit, you will have to answer all polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions regarding CTP credits, please send an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. Again, CTP questions, send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We'd like to hear from you, so please ask your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Finally, I appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable times. Our learning objectives for today. We'd like you to be able to understand how to leverage an AP automation solution in conjunction with your ERP to deliver best practices in the arena of accounts payable. We'd like you to be able to define the benefits of improving supplier relationships and impacting productivity across the enterprise attributable to investment in AP automation. Finally, we'd like you to be able to define the ROI to right-sizing technology relative to accounts payable excellence at your company. I'm going to add another learning objective for today. I would like everyone to take an action after the webinar today. That action can be as simple as reading one of the additional resources that I point out, some of the survey results, taking an accounts payable or treasury or finance colleague out to lunch, or sending me a LinkedIn connection request. So really, my job is not complete unless I inspire you to take an action from investing your valuable time with us today. So how are we going to accomplish our learning objectives today? Well, first of all, we're going to take some time and discuss the evolution of accounts payable. The accounts payable function, the evolution has been absolutely fascinating me over the past 2 to 3 years. I have a long background in treasury and finance, and I really hadn't paid all that much attention to accounts payable until the last couple of years. Especially as a public speaker, I have been asked to do research and speak in the arena of accounts payable automation probably 10 to 15 times over the past 16 months. And prior to that, I don't think I'd ever been asked to do research into this area. And I'm absolutely fascinated about how far we've come and then what the future actually looks like. And to me, it's fascinating how many departments and how many people are touched in terms of the AP process at a company. So if you've never been to the weeds of accounts payable, I think it's going to be an eye-opening experience for you. And I'd like to talk about why that evolution has happened and why we're going to continue to see this evolution. We're going to talk about automation, the cure for accounts payable headaches. And then as we talk about automation, we'll also talk about systems integrability and how this automation in conjunction with your ERP systems and other business systems is really going to unlock the value of the accounts payable function at your company. We'll talk about the strategic outcomes of AP automation and the ROI. I'll also just cover how to develop and deliver an effective business case for investment in AP automation. In Treasury, a lot of times what I've seen is there seems to be a compelling business case on paper or on the surface, but a lot of times business projects die on the vine because of ineffective communication, and also because at some companies there is a Mr. or Mrs. No within the company that happens to have sway with senior executives. And one of the things we need to be able to do is we need to be able to get those people on our side and to have them be our evangelists, and also to be able to explain to them how investing in AP automation is going to improve the strategic value that they offer your company. And then we'll also offer some closing thoughts and resources. I always like to offer some additional resources because during our short time together today, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly how to optimize the AP function at your company. However, I think I'm going to give you some valuable suggestions, insights, give you the tools to ask the right questions, and point you to some resources that can help your company on its journey to delivering a world-class accounts payable function. So in order to level set, I'm going to go ahead and ask our first polling question here. And then our first polling question is asking you, of course, you could all be management. What is it that your management team is most concerned about with relation to accounts payable? And this can be one of the big reasons that you are joining us on the webinar today. So what is it? What's that area of opportunity? What's that low-hanging fruit or that next step in your company's journey in terms of optimizing the AP function at your company? I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. For those of you interested in CTP credits, again, you will have to answer all of the polling questions during the webinar. And finally, I'm going to remind you several times, I'd love to have your questions in the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. I will do my best to get to all of your questions during the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. If I don't happen to get to your questions, I will follow up with you directly. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question here, and then I'm going to go ahead and share those results with you. So let me go ahead and give you the 5-second warning here. Go ahead and get your answers in. Okay, I'm going to close the polling question, and let's go ahead and take a look at those results. So not tremendously surprised here. I'm reducing the time it takes in terms of the AP processing, and also reducing the money spent on invoice processing. So we'll definitely cover both of those today, and of course they are absolutely related. On the first point, taking the time it takes for AP to process invoices, that's important on many fronts. One of them is in terms of taking discounts. So there are many companies out there that are not even able to take discounts that are offered, and the opportunity cost from not taking those discounts can be huge, and it also can negatively impact those supplier relationships, and then reducing the money spent on invoice processing. So those of you that are saying that, I'm sure you have a good idea of absolutely how much it costs for you to process an invoice. To me, it's pretty surprising how many companies do not know how much it costs them to process a single invoice. So if that's something that you haven't invested in, I think that's absolutely the first step in optimizing your accounts payable function, is to know how much it costs you to process that invoice. That gives us that benchmark just in terms of that side of it. There are many more areas to optimize, which we'll talk about, but definitely one of the key is to optimize the cost of processing the invoice. So let me go ahead and turn us back to the evolution of accounts payable. So this is a great graphic from Ardent Partners, the state of e-payables. I love this. So just what I talked about. Even when I was heavy in treasury back in the late 90s, I would say accounts payable was a back office function. And then as we started to move 2000s, the middle of 2000, 2005, 2010, we started to be a point of collaboration. We started to understand the value of those supplier relationships, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I think what we're finally starting to see, at least in the past few years, it's really becoming a true intelligence hub. So there is absolutely almost nothing more important than our relationships with our suppliers. Of course, our relationships with our customers are equally important, but that information on how to be better partners with our suppliers, how to take advantage of discounts, how to optimize that cash, and just how to deliver that business intelligence across the enterprise is a huge area of opportunities that many companies are only starting to realize through leveraging technology. That's automation. Again, we'll talk about this in more detail. How are we going to align these AP automation solutions with our ERP systems and other business systems in order to deliver business intelligence, in order to facilitate data-driven decision-making across the enterprise, and how do we optimize the flow of cash within our company and what it costs to move the cash in and out of our company's bank accounts. So a little bit more color here. This is another fascinating study by Ardent Partners, the State of e-Payables 2017. I have a hyperlink there. Again, the slides are available in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll send you the link as well. I encourage you to take a look at the study. The study had almost 200 respondents. 68% of those were accounts payable professionals with AP titles. Another 18% were finance and treasury professionals. The vast majority of the companies surveyed were actually $250 million and above. So to me, this is pretty encouraging. So if we look at how AP is viewed, 45% very valuable, highly involved in finance operations. So we're almost there. And then this is where I think we'll start to see the pie get bigger. Exceptionally valuable. AP is a key hub for supporting many objectives. The back office number, it's 13%. I'm glad to see that's pretty low in that 31%. Somewhat valuable, overly tactical. The good news is a lot of the value in AP automation solutions is that we can move AP away from being so tactical. We can remove some of those manual processes, including some of those controls. And what does that do? It gives AP more time to focus on strategic activities, whether that be looking at discounts, working with procurement to negotiate those discounts, seeing what kind of room we have on the opportunity cost of our capital on that side of it, but also in terms of optimizing the payment types that we have. So one of the things that we start to see is we really look at accounts payable, and it needs to consider the portfolio of the payment mix that we have. So if you're writing checks, it's very expensive. There's a risk to writing checks. We'll talk about the fraud exposures. There are opportunities if you are able to move your spend towards purchase cards or managed cards or some of these supplier networks. There are companies that are actually, I don't like this as a treasury professional, but some companies are actually making money through rebates by making payments. So again, what we're starting to see is that evolution from that back office function to that strategic player in the market. Again, just some background here, which kind of makes this point, right? This is again from the Ardent Partners Survey. Areas currently managed and supported by AP. AP's being looked to make selection and tech management in terms of technology. If you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I would have given you a very strange look, because the IT group just had their hands around everything so tightly. But now with these cloud-based solutions, finance and AP are able to take the lead on these solutions and actually support them, and especially the cloud-based solutions, driving financial visibility and providing intelligence to key stakeholders. Again, we talked about that. So our AP automation solution, one of the great things it does, it gives us visibility into how our suppliers are paying us, when they're paying us. So fantastic ability for us to really impact those relationships with suppliers. On the finance side, a point around that. When I was in finance, the only time finance was involved with our customers was when there was an issue when they weren't paying. We've got to get away from that. We need to engage our finance leaders with our customers on something that's non-confrontational. Maybe it's something where the finance leaders at our company can collaborate with the finance leaders at our suppliers. But in finance, what we need to do is we need to be involved in making those relationships, improving those relationships with our suppliers, and being a trusted partner with them. I worked in manufacturing for a long time, and it was very important for us to have good supplier relationships. Things happen. We needed an order. We needed a concession. We needed something, and we needed to have those relationships in place. If you don't have a good relationship, if it's confrontational, guess what? When you have unhappy customers, your supplier is not going to come through for you in the clutch. Talked about this a little bit more later. Directly influencing cash and corporate liquidity. One of the things which is a great value to the visibility is it's going to improve our cash forecasting. So what is that going to do? It's going to be able to improve our working capital management, especially if you are a net borrower. So if you are a borrower of money and you don't have a good idea of what your payable spend is going to be, you don't want to have to unexpectedly do a short-term borrowing or draw on your line of credit. And then the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to have to borrow unnecessarily. So having that visibility is key. Also, if you're in global markets, having that forecast in terms of what are my needs going to be in other currencies, in euros or yen. So the last thing I want to do is go out and buy currency when I don't need it, or be in a rush where I'm going to have to just take whatever spot rate I can get from my FX provider. So these areas are being influenced by AP, which is fantastic. We talked about supplier relationship management. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but again, what I want to make is now we're seeing in Treasury, especially, we were more focused on trying to get the money in CRM side on the AR side of the house, but now we're starting to see, which is fantastic, is on the AP side of the house. So I think what we're going to start to see is a focus on optimizing that cash conversion cycle, and we have to have visibilities into both sides of the house. And so and that's why it's critically important for our AP systems to communicate with our AR systems, because a lot of the times the information on our customers, how they pay us and things like that, some of that information is going to be in our ERP system. It's going to be in our customer master. So we have to have the ability to get that information, pass that information back and forth, and take that into some analytical tools. It's got to be quality information. So we have to have that systems integrability, and then supply chain finance, financial abilities. So what is that? That visibility allows us to see if there's opportunities to partner with our suppliers as well. So to me, this is great. It speaks to the evolution, and these are all things that companies are starting to see. And this is really where we should be. For some companies, this is aspirational. If you're not there, if you're in AP, this is where you want to be, and this is where you want to get your seat at the table. And having the right AP automation solution in alignment with the right processes and people is going to allow you to earn that strategic seat at the table. Again, on the ERP side, the ability to push that information back and forth. A lot of times the information with several of the AP automation providers is done through APIs, which make it, they're already built, they're built to allow these systems to communicate to each other. So if you're looking at an AP automation providers, you want to ask them if they have an API for your specific ERP. A lot of them have specific APIs, and if not, they're willing to work with you and make sure that your business systems communicate with each other, because again, we need to get that technology singing in AP, across AP to our ERP system. We need to get that to sing with our Salesforce.com, our HRIS systems, because all these systems together allow us to make data-driven decision making. And then some more background on the if we look at the essential elements of accounts payable in the survey. So what are the things that companies are seeing that's going to help accounts payable optimize the value they offer? Smarter systems, right? We talked about these AP systems. We'll talk about how they work. Deeper, more agile analytics and reporting, visibility and reporting. Again, informed decision making, of course, executive support, enhanced collaboration with key stakeholders. This is key. So a lot of the AP automation solutions give us visibility into the entire workflow, the entire process. We can see where things are getting held up, if there's bottlenecks, who's holding up things for approval. So what is our workflow? How do we optimize various areas of our workflow? A lot of these systems allow us to see now that all the communication with our suppliers, we can have a 360-degree view. Some of these systems allow us to use chat features, so we can really have that real-time communication. And what we want to do is we want to be proactive in dealing with our suppliers. So we want to head off any problems of the past, and we want to identify opportunities to offer value to our suppliers as well. And of course, we talked about eradication of tactical tasks. So we'll talk about how to quantify some of the benefits. But again, we want to get away, obviously, from these manual processes. Our goal is to have straight-through processing. Of course, we want to maintain the controls that we have and separation of duties, but we can absolutely do that with these solutions, and also the controls that we're able to invoke and monitor in our ERP solution in addition to our AP automation solution. So again, just more horsepower for you. Why AP? Why now? Real-time data for better cash management. We talked about that. It's becoming a top priority for CFOs, and it's also becoming a priority for investors in publicly traded companies. People are starting to look at deployment of cash on hand, and some of the metrics in Treasury are changing around how we're able to free up that cash, how we're able to use that cash. We'll talk about this. Payments fraud is still rampant. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are identifying and locking down those payments risk exposures, and we'll talk about how those vary by payment type. And then oftentimes when we leverage automation and we still have to have the right controls on top of that, we are able to mitigate and in some cases eliminate payments fraud risk. The more people you have involved and the more systems that you have involved in that payments process, the more risk exposures that you're going to have. So it's definitely key to use technology to help us mitigate those exposures. Of course, we talked about manual paper and processes. Definitely want to mitigate those. And then companies, again, realize the strategic value of improving supplier relationships. And then another point that I really didn't make too well yet is that this technology is affordable to any business size, and it's in most cases cost effective. The business case is pretty compelling. It's pretty straightforward. And of course it matters how many invoices you process a month, but it can also matter on the dollar amount of the invoices that you so how much spend do you have in terms of dollar amount. So it's not only about the volume, it's about the dollar amount. So when you start to see you see these percentages, especially on the cost side, in terms of saving per invoice or per dollar, that you're pushing out the door. These numbers become very compelling, and you have to be able to round out the business case. We'll talk about this a little later. So we're going to mitigate the cost, right, to processing that invoice. What else are we going to do? We're going to improve supplier relationships. We're going to be able to take those discounts. We're going to be able to impact productivity across the enterprise, and we're going to be able to measure and quantify how we do all these things when we're building that business case. So a little more color. Again, talk about the strategic value of cash. Those of you that are more visual like myself, I talked about on treasury, we would normally have been on the left side. So we're on the AR side, we're focused on what do I want? We're focused on receiving the cash. That's what we want to do. But now we start to look at the right side. Okay, how do we optimize receipt of products, PO matching, process invoices, and how do we pay for the products, right? In terms of traditional purchase to pay, what we need to do is peel back the onion a little bit on the purchase to pay. How do we onboard our suppliers? That starts our relationship. On the backside of it, how do we pay? Why do we pay? When do we pay? In terms of AP, what I like to say is the more that I peel back the layers, the more that I find, the more opportunities exist. So the more that you get into the weeds, the more you see that there are more opportunities to take actions which oftentimes aren't very costly that are going to offer value to your company. Again, strategic value of cash. I won't go over this. You can print the slide out, but it's almost always the case that if it makes sense to take a discount. So if you're going to receive a discount, receive 1% discount of payment received within 10%. I just calculated the effective interest rate. What that does is it tells us the opportunity cost of not taking the discount. So unless your opportunity cost of capital, oftentimes your cost of borrowing money is less than 18%, it makes sense for you to take that discount. Also, in terms of negotiating and taking discounts, you can start to get into dynamic discounting. What we started to see a couple years ago, I think it might be still going on, is people were just holding on to cash, not paying for 90 days. And I think there was a lot of opportunities being missed in terms of negotiating those discounts. And all the surveys I saw, there really wasn't a reason why these people were holding on to that cash. Well, first of all, if you are very risk averse, you're not making money on that cash to begin with, of course. And if you have reporting requirements, that's different. But you need to look at the opportunities to optimize that cash. We talked about forecasting cash values and also the value in leveraging the electronic payments, which is how those payments are being made. So another reason it's important, payments fraud is rampant. 2017 AFP Payments Fraud and Control Survey. I encourage you to read that. It's probably a little scary, but to me it's really eye-opening of the amount of fraud and attempted fraud that's still going on. 74% of companies have experienced fraud in 2016. That number, I think, will continue to go up. As you can see, those fraudsters do not discriminate by company size. They also do not discriminate by payment type. And this graph, I also encourage you to take a look at and do a little bit more depth after the webinar. Just look at that check fraud. It's still at 75%. It's still almost 30% higher than the next form of payments fraud, which is wire transfers. So again, if you're writing checks, I encourage you to find out why you're writing checks. If it has to do with the remittance detail you pass along, you can do that electronically. So there are a lot of ways to get off of checks. There are ways to convince your partners to accept electronic payments, studies, resources, suppliers out there. Some of the AP automation partners will actually help you convert your suppliers at no charge to electronic payments. So payments fraud is rampant. You have to pay attention to that, but you really want to look at if you're writing checks, why you're doing that, and you want to mitigate that. And if you're looking at the type of electronic payments fraud, what we see a lot there are these business email compromise scams. And we have other webinars on that as well, and content on Treasury Careers, full webinars on that. But one of the biggest things that you can do is in terms of employee education. So every person that is involved in the payments process at your company, you should sit down with them and explain to them how to open email, what to open, what not to open, how to conduct themselves on social media, the impact that they personally can have on the risk exposures of your company. So that is absolutely a big part of mitigating that risk. And employee education is kind of a low-cost way, but that's probably the most effective way to mitigate a lot of these BEC scams. So now let's take a look at some of the pain points that we see on the supplier management side and on the payment side. And then, of course, we'll talk about how automation mitigates those and the value that it offers. So what we can see on the supplier relationship management side, if we don't have the right technology, we can have a lack of visibility into what's owed. Our suppliers and us aren't on the same page on what's owed, when it's owed, discounts taken, what they're being paid. We can have untimely communication. And here's the problem that we have. And unfortunately, I think most companies are still this way. You're reactive instead of proactive. You want to be proactive in terms of your supplier relationships. There's this term going on around life cycle value of your customer. You need to focus on the life cycle value of your suppliers. In today's business world, I'm seeing more and more suppliers actually going into joint ventures with their customers. So the world is changing. So we need to have those relationships in place. You don't know when you're going to need that strategic partnership. Some of the payments pain points that we'll experience if our AP function isn't working correctly. We're losing discounts. We have our friend here who's kind of lost. He doesn't have the visibility. He doesn't even know what discounts are available. There are metrics around this, what you get the visibility, what percent of discounts are you taking. So you want to make an educated decision on that depending on your opportunity cost of capital. We talked about ineffective working capital management. What happens if we don't have a good forecast of accounts payable? Not only the amount, but the currencies that we're going to have to buy and sell. We need that visibility in there. We need to see what we have coming in the pipeline. Got to push that to our treasury folks so they can do the best job possible at managing our FX risk exposures. We talked about sometimes if we don't have the right relationships with our suppliers, they can almost force us to use checks or costly payments methods. If we had a better relationship, we could communicate with them and they would understand how it's beneficial to them to maybe accept an electronic payments, which is much more costly, much less costly to us. But using the electronic payments can also help us deliver better remittance information to them. So when I was in Treasury and we used to get checks, cash application was extremely painful. At least we got some sort of information. We used OCR technology and we had some information. But what's going on now is companies are passing this information along electronically, so it's right. We don't have any OCR characters, so the remittance information is actually much, much, much more accurate. But also on the receipt side, you may no longer need to have that lockbox. Any of you who have ever managed lockboxes, that can be a nightmare in and of itself. We can also have cumbersome controls on AP and also payments. So we absolutely need to have separation of duties and the right number of controls, but we need these controls. We need to be able for our folks to be able to move things when they're on the road. Mobile functionality is key as well. So we need to make sure that we don't have cumbersome controls, whether we're moving invoices through the process or we're actually trying to get those payments done. So again, I mentioned those in Word. Let's put some statistics behind this, and some more survey data. Top challenges: manual routing of invoices for approval. AP automation can do away with that. Manual data entry and efficient processes, again, technology upgrades. Majority of invoices are received in paper format, lack of visibility. So all these things, just giving you some information as you're building that business case. And then one of the things that you might want to do if you're a treasury professional or a CFO and you really want to understand how you might be able to extract more value from the AP function, maybe what you want to do is you want to take this slide and show your AP folks, say, hey, look at this survey data. What are the top challenges that we face? What do you think we can do about it? So as we make that business case, if we're not the AP leader, what we want to do is we want to sit in their chair and understand what challenges they face and then show them. Just as a talking point, you have to learn how to understand, to speak the language of AP. Even though you're in finance, I got news for you. You don't speak the language of accounts payable. I was in treasury. I was pretty close to AP and AR, so I have a pretty good idea of the language and the systems and the processes and everything, but there's still the nuances there. So if you're not the AP leader, these survey results actually give you a great way to engage those who are really going to be involved in making sure that the execution of your accounts payable transformation plan results in optimizing the benefit to your company. So let's talk about some cure for the headaches. Let's talk a little bit about automation. Let's talk about what that looks like. Try and get a little bit deeper here into the title of the webinar a little bit more isn't how that automation works with our ERP system and how that information flows back and forth. So I love this graphic. So those of you who have never been in the weeds of accounts payable, print this out, take a breath. So I think it's pretty apparent that there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of systems involved. So on the supplier side, there's information that goes. First of all, we have to set them up as a supplier. That is really the beginning of our relationship. How do we do that? How do they send us documents? Do they do it in the mail? Do they do it electronically as we get them set up? Can we even set them up? Are there OFAC restrictions we need to look at? How do we get them in our system? How do we get the tax documents to them? Back and forth. Again, all these things are key. So, okay, so we're going to get them set up in the system. We have to have that approved. We're going to create an AP item. Okay, maybe it's manufacturing. Did we have the PO? Did we match everything on the PO? What systems are involved there? Is our ERP involved on that side? How is that information being pushed if we have that AP automation solution? So how is that information being pushed on the payment side? What is the relationship between our ERP and our bank system? Are we pushing information from our ERP to our AP automation solution? Are they communicating directly to the bank? What are the relationships there? So what you see is we've got your people in different departments, several people in your AP department, maybe at different levels, different areas, separation of duties. You can have interaction with your treasury staff on many levels. You can have interactions with your IT staff. You can have interactions with your CFO on the approval side. You can have, like I said, multiple ERP systems depending on your company structure. You may have had acquisitions. So this is a pretty complicated process. And in order to realize this straight through processing, oftentimes it's necessary for the information that needs to be communicated back and forth between your ERP system and your AP automation solution. So I see some companies, they are trying to, in some sense, customize their ERP systems to be an AP automation solution. I got news for you, it's probably not going to work. If you get it to work, it's going to cost you millions of dollars. You're going to have to program your ERP system. You're going to have an expert. So the system, it just wasn't built for that. And the cool thing about a lot of these AP automation solutions, especially the cloud ones, is that they were built to pass data back and forth. They weren't built to keep people out, to keep data out, to make it difficult to pass information back and forth. So again, this slide is pretty interesting if you've never been in the weeds, but it just shows the number of people involved, the number of systems involved, and then it kind of shows some of the flows and some of the places, the risk points that we'll see, and also some of the points you may identify as you map out your AP process. You might want to say, these are places where I have a manual process, I have a manual audit. So where are the areas that you can improve? And then start to look at your AP automation solution. Oh, this can do this and this, but this might require some information from our ERP. So I need to make sure that my AP automation solution is able to communicate with my ERP system. Does my AP automation solution have that API in place? If not, what's it going to take me to get there? So the communication is going to be key. So if you're looking at an AP automation solution, just some of the key characteristics that you might want to look at. So there's probably three groups of us on the webinar today. Some of us are probably using paper and Excel. We're kind of at the beginning process. The next group is going to be, they're really starting to look at AP automation solution. They've been hearing all these webinars, reading all these white papers. They just want to see what's out there. They're doing their due diligence. And then there's some of us on here. The top group is going to be, not the top group, those a little bit farther along are going to be the ones that may already have an AP automation solution. And one of two things, they're trying to make sure that they're leveraging all the functionality that they have, and also they're trying to get a better sense of how they can ensure that their ERP is communicating effectively with their AP automation solution. Again, and those of you who are looking, you might say, you might have been attracted by, hey, I've got an ERP system. I'm kind of concerned on what's going to happen if I introduce that AP automation solution. How do these systems communicate with each other? I really don't want to cause any friction with my ERP system. I don't have the IT staff. We talked about that. Two things, right? There's APIs that exist, and a lot of the heavy lifting we would normally see. AP automation solutions are in the cloud, and you can actually own these systems. The security, the upgrades are made automatically. So a lot of the IT support you might have needed in the past is often not the case. So you want that end-to-end, supports the entire invoice process. The invoice process, that's a whole nother webinar in and of itself. Those of you who are in the weeds with me in the AP process, we want it to be automated. We want to require as little data entry as possible, no user interaction. We talk here, seamless, integrates with your existing ERP system. Of course, you might have a lot of customizations on your ERP system. However, your AP automation solution providers, most of them have experience in the main ERP systems, multiple ERP systems. So I wouldn't let that stop you from making an educated decision. Ask, do demos, go out there, see what's out there. It's worth your time. Quick to implement. That's key. It's amazing to me how fast some of these systems get up and running. I've seen a month, I've seen 2 months, I've actually seen a couple weeks. When we used to do just version upgrades in ERP or ERPs, it would take us 2 years. But of course, that depends on the amount of work that you do up front. You want to have an intuitive, simple user experience interface. So those involved in the AP process, we want to make sure that this change in technology is an upgrade to them, a friendly user experience. It's easy to train them. You want to talk to your AP automation provider about their training program. Of course, you want to have the security of your data. We talked about this. You want to make sure that automation enables you to improve relationships with vendors and your internal teamwork. And then, of course, saying this over and over, integrability, which means that your systems communicate with your ERP system, your HRIS system, your CRM system, so that integrability. So in order to optimize the AP function, you want to say, okay, if I've got that ERP system, this is the AP automation that I want to combine with that functionality and get that data on the same place, analyze that data to really deliver that business intelligence across the enterprise. For those visual folks on the call today, just boom, I love these in simple terms, not in simple terms, but visually. You want to be able to sync your open bills. It's amazing to me what's being done on the PO matching side, especially if you're in manufacturing. I guess almost every firm has this now. They still have POs, but it amazes me. A lot of the companies are digging in on the PO matching. It's phenomenal what companies are doing on that side and the time it takes. If you don't have that, you want to have that workflow, authorize payments, execute payments, and on the backside, sync those payment details. So this is incredibly important. I have not made this point yet. Shame on me. A lot of the benefits in terms of the cost is going to be on the journal entries that are going on. So in terms of the way that you're making payments, especially electronic payments, if you use P cards, credit cards, what you're able to do is you're able to automatically pull in that payments detail. you can assign those GL codes, so you can eliminate an awful lot of accounting journal entries in terms of the AP processing. So that can be a huge benefit to these solutions if you are able to convert some of your payments and you're able to eliminate a lot of the journal entries that you're probably spending time on. When I was in Treasury, I couldn't stand it. To some of you, this may not seem a lot, but every month, and I was a Treasury manager back in the day, I was probably making 20 or 30 journal entries a month. It used to drive me crazy. Nowadays, I don't think it's necessary to do that. So again, security, pay from everywhere, mobile. Again, you want to have those controls, thresholds, limits. And a lot of times, the fact that we're automating processes, we're taking manual intervention in the systems, that's mitigating our risk. It'd be great to optimize the payments method. So we want to be able to look at our payments portfolio, checks, ACH, credit card, what type of card. We want to be able to be actively involved in that. One of the things that AP automation does is it gives time back to our AP staff so we can start looking at optimizing these payments methods. Huge value. Again, I've talked about, if possible, we want to quit processing checks and we want to quit sending so many files. I love this graphic here. So again, more how the system works. Automatically retrieves POs and record from the ERP system. Again, here's our ERP system. Presents the invoice along the cited purchase order, links the purchase order line items with the invoice, identifies match and mismatch portions, automatically codes the invoice, provides integrated workflow. So this really illustrates the PO side that I was talking about. And then finally enables posting of invoices to the ERP system with links to the purchase order, including ensuring that the PO to invoice reconciliation process is complete. So this part, to me, I'll be honest with you, when I learned about this about a year ago, this fascinated me. So there's so much going on in terms of the PO process and getting that payment even set up. This really speaks to all the things that are going on and all the flow of information. So this is really a piece where I'd say the PO piece is where you're really supercharging, your ERP system. So you're leveraging that information in there. You're able to match that, so you're able to really to stop a lot of that bottlenecks that I would see in terms of that in processing the payments. And then I talk about the other side of the P2P area. We're seeing, again, we talked about AP automation. I talk about conquering the last mile of AP automation, optimizing payments. So we talked about some of the benefits. Again, here's some more survey data for you. You got cost savings, speed of settlement, fraud control, straight through working capital improvement. So again, one of the reasons I hit these points over and over is that part of this is going to be that business case. When you start to peel back the onion, your business case is going to become pretty compelling. You're going to be able to understand how AP automation can help your company. But again, you're going to have to make sure that some of the benefits that are unlocked by AP automation are going to be dependent on the ability of your solution to communicate with your ERP system. So this is a tool that I love. If you're just looking at a really top level value of some of the savings you might be able to realize from doing an AP automation investment, I encourage you to take an action. One action that I would encourage you to take is to go to this calculator on the Mineral Tree website. It's a value calculator. You can play around with your numbers. It's actually fascinating of what you can do. Just the back of the envelope calculations. What can happen is your eyes can immediately open. You can start to put some numbers in there. You start to see that savings, and you're like, holy moly, man, this is even going to impress my CFO. If you're the CFO, it's going to impress you directly. But this is something that I would certainly recommend that you take a look at. And we talked about trying to quantify the ROI. This is a way to get that back of the envelope calculation. So now I'm going to go ahead and launch our next polling question. So just want to level set with the audience on where you might be at in terms of your AP automation journey at your company. Again, those of you who might be interested in CTP credits, we need you to answer the polling question. Of course, I would love everyone to answer the polling question. Also want to remind you that we can still take your questions in the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. If I do not get to your questions during the Q&A session, I will follow up with you directly. And also I want to make sure to let you know that anything related to the content of the webinar or anything you want to learn more about AP automation, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to have a conversation with you offline and also possibly help you get connected with your colleagues in the AP and Treasury space who face the same challenges that you are facing. So let me go ahead and close the polling question here. I'm going to give you the 3-second warning. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So good. Just as I mentioned, a pretty good mix. So 16% just starting. So we have some of you in the discovery phase. Some of you are implementing. So 39% are implementing, or you're there. So those are either implementing. It's great. To you, I would speak these words to power. Make sure that you understand all the functionality that you have to be turned on, that can be turned on. Just when we talk about the strategic outcomes of AP automation, I'm just going to give you the next slide. Print this out. See if you're able to do all these things with your solution. Turn these things on. Make sure that the communication between your ERP system and your AP automation solution is aligned. Those of you who don't know or not applicable, that's cool. I hope I've inspired you to find out. If you are in Treasury or finance, the one thing I would do is I would go over and ask softball the question. I was just curious, how much does it cost us to process an invoice? Hopefully you have a good relationship. You might not get a dirty look, but I think there's some slides in here that can help you start some fantastic conversations, because I can guarantee you, if you don't know, I guarantee you it's worth your time to find out. And just take a look at this presentation. Actually, you might want to share the presentation, share the recording, start the conversation. But wherever you are, in this process, given the cost effectiveness of the technology that we're seeing now, it just makes sense to look. Companies of all sizes can realize the benefits. So again, I talked about those of you who might not know or might be in the beginning stages. Some of these are the components of that value proposition, right? AP automation eliminates payment of duplicate invoices. It's amazing to me, surveys I've seen, how many companies are processing duplicate invoices, let alone paying duplicate invoices. So you have to have that visibility. Some of the functionality now allows you to automatically identify when duplicate invoices are getting through the system. It will kick them out. It will red flag those. I've seen duplicate invoices being processed as high as 15%. So that's something that is very important. We talked about eliminate suboptimal payments methods. Let's get off those checks. Improve supplier relationships. Allows for discounts to be captured. Removes errors for manual input. How long does it take for us once we get outside our workflow? Holy moly, right? I've seen numbers on the amount of hours that folks spend on processing AP exceptions. That's another area I didn't really touch on enough. I've seen average workers spend 1 to 3 hours, 4 to 10 hours a week resolving these issues, which could mostly be mitigated if we had implemented the right AP automation solution, optimize that workflow, and workflow that also means optimizing the exception items workflow, mitigate payments risk exposures, internal controls improve, transparency, allows employees focus on strategic activities. Right now, you're pretty pumped up about accounts payable automation. I'm pretty pumped up as well. I never thought AP automation could be exciting, but as you can tell, I get pretty excited about it. So let's take a look at quantifying some of those benefits. So let's take a look back at the Ardent Partners survey. So it just kind of shows you, where you're at. If you might be kind of starting out, you don't have that solution, or you might not have that solution optimized. This is kind of the cat's meow. Process a single invoice, best in class in this solution. Again, some of these, I think this survey had a little bit higher tilt on enterprise companies, so don't be too dismayed if you can't get down to $2.74. But let's look at the savings: $10, $13 every invoice. How many invoices do you process? So maybe you're in the airline industry and it costs you $100 for that invoice. Well, let's take a look at that. So what if we can improve, move that cost down by $20, $30, $40, $50 an invoice? The numbers still get you there. Time to process an invoice. Look at that. Best in class, 3.5 days, 12 days. I've seen as high as 15, 30 days. So again, if we can't even process an invoice within 10 days or less, it's going to limit our ability to optimize the discounts and the negotiations that we can do. Invoice exception rate, I actually thought that would be lower for best in class, but we obviously want to mitigate that. Again, it's optimal to have straight through processing. It's awesome to have things submitted electronically, just eliminates a lot of manual errors. And invoices linked to PO, just look at this number, 21%. So what does that mean? How much time do we spend, right, getting from 22% to 70%? So this gives us some hard numbers behind that. Some of the strategic outcomes of AP automation, again, more research, more data. I love to hear myself speak, but what the audience loves is for me to back things up, what my assertions might be. So again, we look at the study. What are the strategic outcomes? So we talked about where do we want to offer this value? Here's where we're seeing it: forecasting, budgeting, planning, handling invoice exceptions. Talked about how much that costs. Improving collaboration, 63%. Payment strategies, optimizing our payments portfolio, enhancing supplier management, cash management, impact of cash. I would say that number should be even higher. If you really have a good relationship with your provider and you are actually implementing all the functionality, there is no reason that you should not see all of these strategic outcomes and be able to quantify all of these and put metrics around them. And especially in terms of just the cost of processing that invoice, you want to have that cost, and you want to track it, and you want to report it, and you want to make sure that number is continually going down in terms of the time each department or person spends. Take a look at those, and then you can put a value on that time spent. So I have a little trick that I've been trying to teach people is that let's say John, instead of spending 2 hours on manually keying, he's looking at discounts. Well, we can actually start to see what's the value of that two ways. One, we can go out and see John was able to help negotiate a discount that saved us XYZ money, but also we can put a multiplier on John being more productive. How much money does John make? We can make him more productive. Boom, how much does that save us from the bottom line? So we need to be able to have these ways to put some horsepower behind those. So let's talk about real quickly the business case for AP automation. So again, I think this is important because a lot of times this is where the projects fall short, especially those of you who are just starting the discovery phase, evaluating, and then those of you who might actually be mid-project, but you might want to have further investment. You want to establish the key pain points your company is facing. So we talked about lack of visibility, costs, controls, also some of the key pain points. So we can have two major parts, right? We can be supplier pain points. We can have payments pain points. We can have productivity pain points, and then the visibility pain points on not being able to see our discounts there. Now we want to accurately define the lay of the land relative to issues need to be addressed. People, process, technology. A really good way to make that business case, you got to try and keep it simple, right? So these are the issues that we face. This is the cost we're going to incur if we continue with the status quo. What kind of gaps do we have in terms of people, process, and technology to get us where we want to go? In terms of so we might need to invest. We need to train somebody up. We might need to spend some time asking our folks to change processes. We got to take that cost into account. And of course, on the technology side, so what are those gaps? How do we fill those? You want to offer multiple solutions to show you've done your homework. You don't want to show that you have a vendor bias. You want to make sure that you're presenting multiple solutions. You want to offer a cost-benefit analysis with defensible assumptions, numbers, and you want to include the impacts on the bottom line. So again, the pillars. You want to talk. You want to speak. You want to resonate with the CFO, the person that's got to approve the spend, the treasury manager, the treasurer. It's really going to speak to us. It's going to be cost savings, of course, but we want to talk about productivity impacts. We want to talk about supplier relationship impacts. We want to talk about improving working capital management. So you really have two constituencies in order to win over for your business case. Those that have the purse strings, but those that are involved in making your vision happen. Anyone in accounts payable or treasury that's going to be impacted, you want to have them on your team. So I didn't touch on this enough. So I touched on it just a little bit. Everyone's going to have a Mr. or Mrs. No. How do you get them on board? When you start to put your project together or research, go over to them, engage them, sit down next to them, ask them the problems that they have, what are the issues that they face, what do they feel they're wasting their time, work with them, see if you can engage them in your project. And then also, we'll get to this on the next slide, when you're putting that business case together, if you know someone's going to have an objection, you want to disarm them out of the gate. So what I do in my executive summary, if I know someone's going to have a big objection, the first thing I do is take that sword out of their hand, and I say, I know you might think this, but this is why it's not true. So getting back to cost benefit analysis, we want to have those numbers. Hard dollar cost savings. Again, I showed you that back of the envelope calculator on MineralTree. It's great. You can dig in deeper. Time savings, productivity impacts, value add activities. All these things speak to the CFO, believe me. Executive summary, you got to convey the urgency in addressing the issues, how it will be done, and what the benefits will be realized in addition to the cost of inaction. You got to know your constituency, right? We have two constituencies, right? The people that control the purse strings and the people that we need to execute our AP vision. And again, executing that vision is often beyond AP. We have to engage Treasury as well, right? And of course we also need to engage AR. What we need to want to do is optimize that cash conversion cycle. You got to present with confidence and passion. Of course, you can tell I'm passionate today. You got to present with that. It makes a difference. You want to clearly define your roles, responsibilities, and accountability for each person that is meaningfully involved in the AP processing. At your company, you want to define how the pieces fit together and the successful project execution. So you want to define success, right, in each area, measure it, communicate it. So you want to establish metrics, benchmarks, you want to establish and maintain accountability, and part of that is really through creating that culture of continuous improvement. People will start to get excited. Believe me, especially if people are able, if they're not able to do so now, if they can improve payments on the road, if they can key things in, if they can spend more time not handling phone calls or AP processes, if they can spend more time on the phone, not having disagreements with suppliers on what they owe, invoices, remittance detail, all those things, AP automation in conjunction with your ERP can work together to mitigate those issues, improve those supplier relationships. I love this graphic. I'm going to confess, one of my favorite graphics from our friends at MineralTree. And this is just something you might want to share with your AP colleagues if you're not the AP leader. It's just kind of funny. So it just kind of grabs your attention. It's kind of like signs you need to automate accounts payable. So someone, a favorite of a comedian of mine, you might need help in accounts payable if, right, you receive or print paper invoices, manual data entries, your folks are stuck waiting on approvals, you have to manage multiple locations, you manually print checks and stuff envelopes, you can't process payments when their CFO's out, you have duplicate data entry often, and you can't add headcount. So the things on the other side are the things that AP automation can offer you in order to alleviate the stop signs. We can keep that going, keep that traffic going, right? Keep that payment going, keep our suppliers happy, optimize that working capital, go paperless, invoice capture, automated approval, multi-entity support, process payments, e-payments, approve on the go, integrates with your accounting system. There we go, ERP fans. And then you want to automate, so you're automating the AP process. So this is something that really puts a nice touch on it for folks as well. So just a few closing thoughts. And this is a slide I would suggest that you might consider printing out as well. Here's what you want to do. You want to maximize the 4 dimension of your AP value. This is from me. You want to mitigate cost mitigation, how much it costs to process that invoice. You want to figure out how to optimize that cash, better cash forecasting, supplier relationship management, improving that, and then offering that business intelligence to facilitate better decision making across the enterprise. You want to define the benefits of improving supplier relationship and impacting productivity across the enterprise attributable to AP automation. You want to define the ROI to right sizing technology relative to AP excellence. Incorporate enhanced functionality, again, as value drivers to justify investments. And then you want to leverage technology to fuel the strategic value delivered by the AP function. Again, cost mitigation, cash optimization, supplier relationship management, and business intelligence, and then in order to help you make that business case. I have some additional resources here. Again, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at these. There's hyperlinks there, the state of e-payables. There's some great resources from our partners at Mineral Tree. Again, the calculator as well. I encourage you to go to the Mineral Tree website. So Q&A, in order to be mindful of our time, I've just got one question I'll take on Q&A. I'll follow up with the rest of you regarding your questions after the webinar. Someone is asking me for some specifics regarding how to engage colleagues in accounts payable if they're in treasury. I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question here. So what I've found are some things that really work for me. One of the things that you can do is take people out to lunch. You can actually have meetings where you bring in lunch. So it might be something as simple as going on a webinar with some folks. Maybe it's the webinar like I'm doing today, another webinar. Just get that conversation starting. If you can't go out with the people in the AP department who you want to, go out with the people they hang out with. You have to get to know these people. The one thing that I've heard works is you can actually start to walk around. If you're in treasury, the CFO, just start to walk around, talk to people, be conversational, become that trusted advisor. It can't be, of course, when I worked in treasury, when the CFO came around, everyone was scared because he didn't do it very often. But if you start to go around every day, create that culture of collaboration, sit down and understand what their challenges are, and then how you might be able to help them, that will go miles to building those mutually beneficial relationships. So in closing, I would like to thank our webinar sponsor, Mineral Tree. We appreciate their commitment to thought leadership, which again is evident in the great resources they offer, which you can view by visiting the Mineral Tree website. And finally, thank you very much to you, the audience, for your valuable time. Make the rest of your day great.